and then we'll do Q&A.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and during the presentation, feel free to interrupt me, because my goal here is to make you happy, to have you walk away saying, oh, I learned useful things. Okay? I should tell you that I'm independent. I don't work for Microsoft. And that I am very focused on enterprise IT, IT for business. If you ask me questions about consumer IT, I probably have opinions, but they're opinions as a consumer, just like your opinions. I don't focus in those areas. I'm not a specialist. I'm a specialist in enterprise IT. Okay? So, what I want to talk about here for a few minutes is this idea of the new default platform. Who was in the keynote I just gave downstairs? Anybody? Sorry, guys. Same slides. Forgive me. Right? They told me that a few of you would have been, most of you wouldn't have been. And this is the key thing I think I'm thinking about right now that we have to understand. This notion of a new default platform. And the way I like to think about this, and you guys who were in the keynote this morning, please don't spoil my story here. Okay? You wouldn't anyway, I'm sure. What were the three most important events in IT, in enterprise IT, in the last decade? What were they? It's a Microsoft event, so you might expect that I would list three things from Microsoft. But no, not one was from Microsoft. I would argue that Microsoft has not been the primary mover in the changes that we are seeing in enterprise IT. They have responded, we'll discuss their response in a few minutes, but they were not the primary mover. I believe the three most important events in enterprise IT in the last 10 years were these. Number one, the IPO, the initial public offering of Salesforce.com. When Salesforce sold their stock to the world. That was about 10 years ago, and it was so important because it showed the world that software as a service, SaaS, apps in the cloud, works. It works as both a technology and, just as important, as a business model. You can make money doing that. Salesforce, you might know, is now the 10th largest software company in the world. Back then, they were a scrappy startup. I live in Berkeley, California, across the bay from San Francisco. Out my window is the city, and I can watch them building their massive Salesforce tower in the city. They're proud of themselves. They should be. Event number two, I think, was the introduction of Amazon Web Services in 2006. You know, this was almost invisible. Nobody saw this. There was no big announcement. There was no big press coverage. Almost invisible. But it was really important because it showed the world that cloud platforms were actually viable. It gave us a new technology, a new business model, a way to charge for computing resources by the hour, storage by the day. The third important event, I believe, is the one that everybody knows. It was among the most visible technology events. In fact, it was perhaps the single most visible technology event of the last 10 years. What was it? The launch of the iPhone, 2007. Do you recall the iPhone launch? I do. I was bowled over. Just like, whoa, I can't wait to get one of those. I was just stunned by how cool it was. The iPhone is what gave the world mobility. This whole big mobile thing we discuss all the time, I would suggest that pre-iPhone, nobody cared much because phones were so doggone primitive. But the iPhone, big fat screen, and now of course Android and Windows phones, have given us a whole new world of phones and tablets and phablets and all that stuff.
Why not BlackBerry?
Why not BlackBerry? Because BlackBerry didn't really create mobility as a category. The thing about iPhones and modern phones is they are computers. They are full-fledged general computers. They can run apps, arbitrary apps. BlackBerry was a phone with a keyboard, optimized to do email and telephony. So BlackBerry had been around for quite a while, but no one discussed mobility as a megatrend because of BlackBerry. Mobility as a megatrend arose after the iPhone and tablets and so on. That's my argument anyway. Again, you might well disagree. This is my perspective here. I'm right, of course. Right? That was a joke. So people, I'm curious, do you agree? Yeah. Any opinions? Do you agree? Yeah? So big events like this, big world-changing events like this, by which I mean totally innovative technology solutions, almost never come from big companies. These didn't come from Microsoft or IBM or Oracle or HP or SAP or any VMware, any big enterprise company. No. They all came from a scrappy San Francisco startup, Salesforce, a bookstore, and a left-for-dead PC vendor. It's amazing. They came out of nowhere. And yet those three events are so important for enterprise IT. Why? Here's why. It's because they are the driving forces, the sparks, that launched the transition to a new default platform. Look at this. Today in enterprises, traditionally, when they build apps, when they use apps, businesses look like this. They had PCs and laptops, right? Okay, great. Then they run their own data centers with infrastructure. They have their own servers and routers and storage. They run Windows and Linux and so on, right? On their own infrastructures, organizations run packaged applications, things they buy, SAP, Oracle, financials, whatever, okay, SharePoint. And they also build stuff, custom apps. That's the classic enterprise IT world. Pretty much every company in the world has that today. Even if all this means is a rack of 4 servers sitting in a closet somewhere. That's classic enterprise IT. The three events I just told you about are the genesis for what I would argue is the new default platform for enterprise IT. That new default platform looks like this. All the PCs and laptops, because of the iPhone, we now care about tablets and phones as well. You know, people so often have used this phrase, the post-PC world. We're living in the post-PC world. Have you heard that?
Yep.
I despise that term. It is stupid beyond belief. What are you using there, man? Oh, look, it's a PC, right? And you have a tablet, is that right? You're typing on? Kind of a big phone, all right? Yeah, almost a phablet. Yeah, okay. But when you go back to your offices and write up something, there's a laptop, right? What's on your desktop back at your office? A keyboard, right? Big monitor? That's called a PC. Those will be with us for who knows how long. I don't want to type all the things I type on a tablet, but I love my tablet. But for other kinds of things, it is not the post-PC world. Stupid idea. It's the PC plus world. It's the PC plus world, where PCs certainly matter, other things matter as well. Okay? On the server side, oh, by the way, that change has already happened. That change is huge, obviously. On the server side, the changes are even bigger. Because here, on the clients, we're just adding new clients. Great. On the server side, we are transforming how IT is done. And this is an enormous change. So, packaged applications. Rather than buying and installing on-premises packaged apps, more and more organizations today instead choose SaaS. A movement that was kicked off by the success of Salesforce. Again, you might imagine, my three big events are chosen because each one drives part of this transformation, the new default platform. It was Salesforce's success that showed that this worked. And so now we're seeing companies more and more buy on-premises packaged apps. I'm sorry, not buy them, use SaaS instead. And for their custom apps, what are they running on? More and more, they build those on public cloud platforms. This transition was kicked off by Amazon in 2007. And here, cloud platforms are becoming the new foundation for how organizations create competitive advantage. What does that mean? Well, why do organizations use apps at all? Applications. When they buy packages, they use applications most often to keep up with the Joneses. If your competitor has cool business processes built through SAP or Oracle or something else, you want those too. These guys let you be as good as your competitors. They can buy the app too. Custom apps will let you be different. They provide differentiation, and thus, one hopes, business advantage. As they're being built more and more on public cloud platforms, they wind up being, those guys wind up being the foundation for competitive advantage going forward. They're really important. So I would suggest to you that this is the new default platform for enterprises, driven by iPhone, the success of Salesforce, and the arrival of Amazon Web Services. Think about this. Every startup in the world today does this. Find me a startup that is actually running its own data center, deploying its own apps on its own data center. They don't. Every startup is going to use Salesforce CRM or Microsoft Dynamics CRM Online, or they're going to use Google Mail or Exchange Online. They're going to build their app on Amazon or Azure or Google. Everyone does this. If you can as a business, you will do this today. Existing people have these boat anchors of data centers and processes and procedures. But if they could, many of them would just jettison that and go to the new world. And just to be clear here, when I say the default, what I do not mean is that enterprises, businesses, government are going to take their apps and move them to this world tomorrow, or next week, or next year. What I do mean is this. I mean that when we build new applications, that new stuff is done in this new world. When you buy a new package, you look for a SaaS solution first. As you move ahead, new things happen here. I'm not saying we're going to move what we have to this world. You might in some cases. But most of this kind of change happens with new things. The analogy I always think of is, and I think the best analogy, is the move from mainframes to client-server back in the 90s. That was a huge transition. And what happened? Did people rewrite their COBOL mainframe apps for PCs and servers? Heck no, not most of them. When they built a new version, though, or built a new app, those new apps were constructed on the platform of the client-server world, not the old mainframe paradigm. That's what's happening here as well. Most of you look far too young to remember that transition. You probably weren't even born, right, when these things were happening, right? So, nonetheless, it's an important corollary here. It's an important example. It's happened before, this kind of shift. Right? How are we doing here? Questions? Comments? You believe me? You buying this? You're buying this. You nodded earlier. Thank you. I appreciate that.